Scott, what do you make of the resignation of Joe Kent? He was, Donald Trump cannot blame him to be a leftist, to be his enemy. This is the guy who supported Donald Trump. This is the guy who really believes in America, who wants America to be more powerful, but he doesn't see that coming with the current policies of the Trump administration.
Joe Kent, no one can question his courage. He has served in some of the world's worst places, under the worst conditions, and he prevailed. Joe Kent we have a large body of, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, but especially the war in Afghanistan, made maximum use of special operations personnel, special forces personnel. We actually expanded their ranks considerably. And so these are very intelligent people, very physically fit people, and people with a moral conscience. But there are people whose moral conscience is defined by a warrior's ethos, not so much by what it should be defined as, which is constitutional principles. I hear these special forces vet bros out there give lip service to the Constitution. But when it comes down to it, as you dig deeper into what they're articulating, they're going for military efficiency. I hate to break it to people, but the Constitution is not efficient. The American form of constitutional government is not efficient. It is ugly, inefficient, whatever, but it's ours. It has checks and balances. The moment you say checks and balances, you imply inefficiency because you're checking and balancing. The military is not about checks and balances. The military is about accomplishing the mission. And Joe Kent is one of these guys that accomplishes the mission. He's given a mission and he accomplishes it. And he's surrounded by people of a similar mindset. But they've fooled themselves into believing that this is constitutional because they took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. Now, by accomplishing the mission, they are fulfilling that oath. What they don't understand is sometimes the mission is operating in opposition to constitutional norms and values. Joe Kent, I saw this when he was running because I had hope for Joe Kent, but then I would read statements he would make about the Middle East. And, he's somebody who, of course, most of these people who fought in these wars, they'll admit that, we were doing the wrong thing. We shouldn't have been there, though, especially Iraq, shouldn't have been there. In Afghanistan, we did it the wrong way, all this stuff. But then and you're like, okay. But then you throw in Iran, and because they don't know anything about Iran. Iran is evil. It's an evil Islamic regime, the worst terrorist organization in the world. And you're like, wait a minute, where'd you get that? And Joe Kent was part of that cut. And the other thing is, as you define yourself as an American, you now, unfortunately, you become factionalized because, again, these people stopped being Americans and started being Republicans. They started to be in opposition to the Democratic Party because many people in the Democratic Party were in opposition to what they were doing in Afghanistan or Iraq. They started supporting the Republican Party out of this mistaken belief that the Republicans actually cared for them. But Joe Kent knows this, Joe. Joe, you've got, I'm assuming, because Joe Kent's a stand-up kind of guy. Lost his wife, Shannon. She was a hero, a heroine. In Syria, she got killed by an ISIS bomb. But if you look at her chest, in the awards on her chest, she's a lady who had been there, done that, and she had the T-shirt. She wasn't just a war tourist. And she died, tragically. And now Joe is raising kids. So he knows the reality of the war. But Joe doesn't know. Joe allowed himself to be captured by the MAGA movement. The MAGA movement is not an American movement. The MAGA movement is a faction. People, please read Federalist 10. I'm sorry, I'm just one of these constitutionalist kind of guys. James Madison wrote Federalist 10 to warn us about the danger of factionalism and the creation of factions. And MAGA is a faction. It's not an American movement. It's a faction. An American movement actually believes that everybody should exist. It understands checks and balances, the need for balance. Factions want everything to go their way. And the MAGA faction is controlled by a group of Zionists who hijacked the MAGA movement to put Israel first, literally. And Joe Kent went along with that, along with others. They thought they were serving America first, MAGA. No, you were serving Israel first, the parasite that had taken over, the American body. He ran for office, and now he gets in. And that's the other thing too. It's easy, and Joe knows this, along with everybody else. They know what the burden of leadership is. Joe knows it better than anybody. He's been in combat. There's no bullshit in combat. There's none. You have a mission to do. Bullshit gets you killed. When you start sitting there spouting crap that's nonsense, you get diverted, and next thing you know, the bullet enters your brain housing group, and your brains get splattered on a wall. Joe knows this because he's seen the consequences of that. But when you get into politics, it's all bullshit, every single thing. And so he bought into a load of crap. And now he comes into office. And now he's at the Counterterrorism Center. And he's seen the truth because he's trying to deal with these terrorist threats that are manifest. And he realizes that we're not hitting the right targets. We're not focused on the right thing. In order to sell this war in Iran, we actually had to define a nation that's not terrorist in nature, the Iranian nation, the Iranian people, and call them terrorists and devote a lot of time into explaining why everything they do is related to terrorism, while the real terrorists are out there not getting the attention they deserve. And then we get pulled into a war that Israel pulled it. And Joe's smart. He knows exactly what happened. He knows Netanyahu told Trump to initiate, and Trump went okay. Kent knows that the Joint Chiefs of Staff said it's a bad idea. Kent knows that Tulsi Gabbard put together an intelligence report and said the regime won't fall. There's nothing you want to accomplish will be accomplished. And he knows that Donald Trump went ahead and did this anyways. He finally, I think he reached the point where he said, I can't do this anymore. I can't live the lie. Because Joe Kent, for all of his faults, and when I say faults, I mean, being sucked into the MAGA movement. Hell, we all were. You're talking to a guy that thought Donald Trump was going to be a peacemaker. Okay? We all got conned one way or another. But like any honest person, when you wake up in the morning, you realize you were conned. He didn't delude himself. He acknowledged it. He wrote a letter, and he resigned. This should be the beginning of a cascade of resignations of conscience, moral consciousness. I don't know if it will be because, again, I've lost a lot of faith in humans, or especially Americans, over time. I'd like to believe when most Americans are empowered with knowledge and information, they'll do the right thing. Sadly, I don't believe that anymore. I think Americans have become addicted to comfort, and therefore they will do whatever is necessary to sustain comfort, even if it's the wrong thing to do. But this could lead to additional resignations. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard needs to resign and start telling the truth about what happened. She wrote this awful post where she basically said she defended the president by sort of trying to tell the truth, but not telling the truth. The president was briefed on all this, that, and the other thing, and the president made a decision. Yes, but Tulsi, what was he briefed on? Did his decision match the conclusion? Because your job as an intelligence officer is to give recommended courses of action. Tulsi, I've been an intelligence officer for a long time. I know what you're supposed to do. And did the president take one of your courses of action? Did he listen to what, or did he just do whatever the hell he wants to do and said what he said before? I don't believe you. I don't trust you. Well, at that point in time, you must resign. If the president doesn't trust you, then you aren't doing your job, and you must resign for the good of the people. Find someone in there that the president does trust. And then you have a duty and obligation to go to Congress and explain this. You don't have to go to the American people because a lot of what you would be explaining is, classified. But Congress has closed sessions. And since the president is long ago self-identified as a man who doesn't believe in the Constitution, doesn't believe in the office of the presidency, he believes in a cult of personality, he believes in a dictatorship, he called himself a dictator, you're not beholden to any confidentiality of conversation with men because he's not a president, he's a dictator. You need to go to Congress and talk about the dictator named Trump and how he's disregarding all the evidence there is and got us into this war on behalf of Israel. Now, half of Congress will try to suppress you because they work for Israel, but the other half might actually start asking follow-on questions, and that could lead to, this president ultimately being held accountable either at the election, at the booth, voting booth on election day, or maybe the ultimate accountability, where his cabinet finally awakens up to the fact that this man is awful for America and harming them, and they invoke the 25th Amendment and remove him. But Donald Trump is, after Israel, he's the greatest threat to the United States of America because he stopped believing in America. He only believes in Donald Trump.
Scott, before wrapping up, we had an interview with the Iranian foreign minister. He said that Iran is designing a new mechanism for the Strait of Hormuz. And there is an article in the Financial Times arguing that Iran's action in the Strait of Hormuz show the reality of multipolar economic warfare. For decades, the United States dominated sanctions and used financial pressure as a strategic weapon. Now, other powers, including Iran and China, can use similar tools to respond to the escalation. How do you see the case of the Strait of Hormuz? Donald Trump is begging Europeans to help him. I don't know in what manner they can help Donald Trump in the Strait of Hormuz, but it seems that it's going to turn into one of the most strategic points or strategic, outcome, the Strait is somehow so important, not just for Iran, but for all of these Arab states, together with Japan, South Korea, China. Everybody is dependent on this Strait. That shows the importance of that. How do you see the way that Iran is talking about and the way that, as an outcome of this war, something is reshaping in the Middle East?
Well, first of all, there's a disconnect between what Iran is saying, which is reality-based, and what other nations are saying. For instance, and not just saying, but doing. I think there's a growing recognition that Iran right now controls the Strait of Hormuz. You don't get through the Strait of Hormuz right now without Iran saying yes. Now, the United States is carrying out a military campaign that's designed to degrade Iran's ability to interdict the Strait. Again, intelligence preparation of the battlefield. I look at a map, I look at the Strait. And the other interesting thing is, the way the Strait operates is you have traffic going in and you have traffic coming out, and there's two lanes, and the traffic coming out takes you in a channel that goes between two Iranian islands, landmass, Karg Island and not Karg Island, Qashim Island and Latak, I think it is. And it's very narrow. You're never going to force that if Iran doesn't want you to force it. Iran hasn't even begun the business of mining the Strait. The other thing Iran hasn't done is sunk a ship in the middle of that channel, because that's the end of that channel. All Iran has to do is put some tankers out there, sink them, bring them down, and they can do the same. Iran controls the Strait, will always control the Strait. We're trying to do a campaign designed to hit Iran's missile. There were, the Aref Missile Brigade. I think I'm saying that right. Aref. It was the one that had the compound that in Manab that they used to own the compound that got bombed by the United States, killing the girls. Arsef, RF, something of that nature. It's organized into 4 battalions. First battalion is short range anti-shipping missiles, 15, 20 kilometer range. Did you see what I just said there? They're 15 to 20 kilometers. That means that they can be back a certain range and still reach in. They don't have to be right on the coastline. Then the second brigade was sort of the medium range missiles. That means that they can strike deeper into the Gulf, or they can be standoff. What you've done now is, when you look at the terrain of the Strait of Hormuz, what I'm defining isn't just in terms of how they can reach into the Strait, but how far back they can relocate and still have the ability to impact the Strait through direct or indirect fires. And then there's the long range. So you have 3 battalions that provide layered closure capability. And the United States right now is focused on bombing the ridges and the mountains that are right there on the coastline, as if blowing those things up save anything. It shows, again, a fundamental lack of understanding. The Iranians have been preparing for this war for a long time. They know how we operate. Oh, the 4th battalion, by the way, does all the unconventional stuff. Lays the mines, fast boats, the whole thing. So it's just a broad spectrum approach to closing the Strait. We're never going to interdict that. The only way to fully open the Straits is to physically control that territory that I just defined. And that means it's not just landing on the shore. You got to go in depth, a couple hundred kilometers. Do we have the 900,000 troops that would take? No. So we're never going to close the straits. And even with shipping going through, imagine you're an insurance company, ship owner. What insurance company is going to insure that? No insurance company is going to sit there and go, yeah, we'll give you the same rate. No, insurance rates would go up, but the cost of shipping is going to go up, and other people are just going to abandon that route and say we're not doing it. It's just not going to happen. Europe right now is saying we're going to talk to Iran to try and get Iran to let our tankers go through, but the Iranians are basically saying you're not doing it the right way. This isn't about negotiating with us to get your oil through. It's about negotiating with the United States to stop doing what they're doing, to stop the war. Iran isn't going to do Europe any favors. Europe has to save itself, and Europe saves itself by identifying as somebody who is sympathetic of the Iranian plight, the Iranian cause. Those nations who have showed sympathy are the ones getting the favorable treatment. Those nations who continue to play lip service to the United States and simply telling the United States that we're not going to send naval forces in. First of all, Iran could care less about the Navy of Europe. Talk about the only thing more pathetic than an Israeli infantry platoon is the Navy of Europe. Sending an Israeli infantry platoon into southern Lebanon means they're all going to die. The Navy of Europe comes in, try to open the strait, they're all going to die. I mean, it's stupid to even have this discussion. Trump is playing a political card here. But the fact of the matter is, it's not that. Iran's not going to reward Europe for that. What Iran wants is Europe to tell the United States to stop this war. Stop it. But now you have Finland saying, we will exchange support for the United States in the Middle East for American support in Ukraine. You see how the Europeans are thinking. So Iran's not going to play that game. So I think what we're seeing here is a permanent redefining of energy security parameters. Whatever calculations, algorithms were used before this war are going to be permanently changed. There's going to be new algorithms. The price of oil is going to be more expensive no matter what, because, for instance, if you're Kuwait, let's say Kuwait's oil production survives this conflict. Strategically speaking, because, all these nations are going to take a hit and they may not survive this hit. Let's say they survive. Let's say the Kuwaiti royal family survives. Now, are they going to sit there and say, well, we're just going to double down on stupid and do what we did again so it can happen again because now Iran can shut the strait anytime they want? Or are they going to start negotiating with the Saudis to build a new pipeline that connects Kuwaiti oil to the Red Sea? But then what they have to understand is that that pipeline begins someplace. And that'll just be the target for the Iranians. This changes everything. That now that the world has gone stupid, now that the Israelis have gone stupid, the Americans have gone stupid striking Iranian energy, this means from now on, these energy fields are targets. That changes the whole approach. It's the same thing what's happening in Russia. When the Ukrainians started going after Russian strategic oil manufacturing and processing facilities, the Russians realized that you have these giant facilities with no protection. And so the Russians are now in the business of hardening these facilities, physically putting in air defense, the whole works. There's the role being played now of Russian industry and counter drone technology. It's not just the Ministry of Defense that comes in. These oil companies are now responsible for protecting their own selves, so they're developing counter drone technology. Well, this is going to be the next reality. You can't talk about building an oil field in the Middle East anymore until you talk about how to defend which now your expenses go up. So everything's going to cost more. Everything's going to cost more. And the other thing this does is shows the vulnerability of all sea lanes of communication. Look at the Straits of Malacca in Indonesia. That's another one, a critical one. Everything goes through that. Easiest place in the world to shut down after the Strait of Ормуз. Bab el-Mandeb, Yemen can shut that down. Suez Canal. We saw what happens if you get a tanker turned the wrong way and get stuck. It's shut. Well, maybe it's time for Iran to start sinking shipping in the Suez Canal and shut it down too. You want to play stupid games. The Iranians, are fully capable of, playing that game as well, meaning making you pay for your stupidity by paying the ultimate price. Short-term pain for long-term gain. This is going to be long-term pain for no gain whatsoever. That's what's going on in the world today.